Welcome, Bronco Nation. My game preview for Boise State versus Colorado State. Boise State coming into this game 5-2 versus Colorado State, who is currently 2-5. Now they have won 2 out of their last 3 games, but they are still 2-5 here on the season. Game at Boise State, October 29th, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, FS1. Boise State is favored in this matchup, given a heavy favorite. It's really one of the first games that they've come into so far this season, at least at this back end of the season, the Coach Dirk Cutter switch part of the season, that Boise State is actually entered as a heavy favorite, given a 95.1% chance of winning and a 27-point favorite according to Vegas. Now, having said that, I do want to point out that this is a trap game. This is a major trap game for Boise State. We have BYU the week after this. Colorado State is desperate for a win versus Boise State. They are the only Mountain West team that has never won ever in the history of Boise State football, going back to the FCS days, before going back to the Division II and everything. Boise State has never lost to Colorado State ever. And they are the second team in the Mountain West to never beat them in the FBS era. UNLV has some wins against Boise State in the FCS, but like Colorado State, has also never beaten Boise State in the FBS era. So you've got Colorado State, who is desperate to win this game. They are very hungry. It is great to have those Ram tears, the Colorado State fans crying after all the losses, but each time they get closer and closer and closer to getting that win against Boise State. So Boise State can never give their guard up against this team. Then you have the fact that it's Mike Norvell, coach who beat Boise State last year with Nevada, having a tough year in his first year at Colorado State, but still a good coach. So even though the team might be bad, they're going up against a very, very good coach here in Mike Norvell. And then there's the fact, like I said, Colorado State started off this season 0-4. Now they're 2-1. So the spiral is starting to end. They're turning a little bit of a corner here. Wins against Nevada and Hawaii, so not great wins, but only a 4-point loss to Utah State. So, and again, that's also kind of hard to determine. Is that a good win or not? Utah State started off the year very rough, and maybe a little bit of a turnaround here so far and back end. But Colorado State is a team that could beat Boise State. Now again, 95.1% chance of winning, 27-point favorite. Boise State really on a win streak here. I mean, a true hot streak here with wins against Fresno State, San Diego State, and Air Force. 3 rival teams back to back in the new era here of the Dirk Cutter era for Boise State this season. But Colorado State could beat Boise if they're not careful. Let's talk about how Boise State avoids that. Now, this is a game on the blue. Boise State is really trying to get to undefeated on the blue this year. That's always a goal for Boise State. Probably the number one goal, I would say, for this program. And probably undefeated on the blue, and then it goes, winning those out of conference, those away games as well, and then conference championship. But defend the blue, always the number one goal. Defend the blue, always the number one goal for Boise State. And they have a really good shot of doing it this year. I mean, if you told me coming into this season that they would have a shot this far in of going undefeated on the blue, I probably would have said no. I mean, in the preseason, I did say no. And that was when I thought Boise State was going to be good, like really good from the beginning. I still didn't think they were going to go undefeated on the blue necessarily. Well, Boise State, they had one of the toughest schedules I thought ever on the blue, and they have gone through it with flying colors so far. Now, they just had to get through Colorado State, BYU, who could be tough, but did just lose badly to my other team, to Liberty. And then they have to play Utah State. Again, that could be a tough game at the end of the year. But Boise State, 3 games away from going undefeated on the blue. So this game becomes big for that reason as well. So a lot of things going on in this game. Enough kind of talking about it at the beginning. We spent quite a few minutes just previewing this. Let's get into actually discussing the game itself and how Boise State gets to another win to 12-0 in the series history here. And let's look some more at that series history. So Boise State, 11-0 against Colorado State, never losing to them ever in the history of Boise State. First ever game against Colorado State actually came in 2011 at 63-13, just shellacking against the Rams. There have been some close ones, 2016, 28-23, the crazy comeback by Boise State. They were down I think it was 2 scores there, and then they came back, onside kick, got it to overtime, won in overtime, 59-52 in 2017. And then 2019, was a touchdown, 31-24. And then 2021 was Boise State win, but it wasn't convincing, 28-19. So Colorado State has been there hanging around, trying to get that win against Boise State. Boise State's got to do a lot, make sure that they are focused in this one, despite the big divide there as far as points Boise State being favored by to go in and make sure they win this game. Key players for Boise State here, top 3 key players for Boise State. It's going to be Taylor Green, number 1, and I always put the quarterback, almost always, I think there's a couple times I have, but I almost always put the quarterback here as a number 1 key player. But that becomes even more important this game because there is a really good chance that Holani and Jeanty are going to be out of this one. Holani aggravating something against Fresno State, soft tissue injury. This is a player who has dealt with injuries his entire career at Boise State. It's been the one thing that's really kind of not derailed him, but held him back from being one of those top Boise State running backs in school history. So he has aggravated something again. Boise State might choose to keep him out this game, even if he's able to play, just because it is a team that Boise State should be able to beat. Maybe they want to keep him a little bit healthier and stronger for that BYU game. But he could be on a limited snap count. Even if he does play, there's some things that Boise State's got to consider. The other fact, of course, you're going to have Ashton Jeanty might be out of this one as well, leaving in the first half against Colorado State, against Air Force. Based on everything that I'm hearing, it sounds like that was some kind of concussion issues that he was dealing with. Now, it seems like he, based on my sources, sounds like he thought he was going to be playing in this game. Same for Holani, actually. But you never know. I mean, that he could end up being held out of this one. Again, even if he's able to play. And again, if it was something concussion related, I don't know exactly what Boise State's concussion protocols are, but you want to be very, very careful. You always do. But even if he is able to play, might be another situation where Boise State holds him out. Either way, you're going to have 2 running backs that are your main ball carriers that are not, even if they do play, aren't going to be 100%. And so Taylor Green's position there as the head of the offense that has become a run-based offense becomes even more important because he's kind of your only guy out of that trifecta of main offensive players, when really the wide receivers are kind of just, they're window dressing around the fact that Boise State is a running-based offense. So, when you talk about star offensive players, 2 of them might be out. Your number 1 guy now becomes Taylor Green. His performance is going to be big against Colorado State. 50 of 80 so far this season. 537 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Passing game's not been his forte. Running game, 35 rushes for 245 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Definitely a big impactor in the run game. Now, talking about that run game, the fact that you might have 2 running backs out, I'm going to put Elion Noah here as a key player for Boise State because it seems like in the absence of Jeanty and Holani, he's the next man up. 17 carries for 45 yards versus Air Force last week, 2.6 yards per carry average. This is a player who hasn't played much so far for Boise State. 24 carries total coming, including that game. So coming into the game, he only had 7 carries overall in the season. 76 yards total on the season, 3.2 yard average. But he's capable. He's definitely capable. He does not have the next level talent that Jeanty and Holani does. And there's not anybody out there who's debating that. But he is definitely a capable back. He showed some things. Maybe he can build on that. His first performance, really taking the ball as the main back for Boise State against Air Force. If he takes the role against Colorado State, a little bit of a weaker defense for sure. Maybe he can build on and have a bigger game and kind of continue to build on that success. We'll talk about that when we get to our keys to the game. Now, the last player here, and I talked about the wide receivers, the receiving game kind of being a assist to the run game and a window dressing, something that kind of comes on the edges around the fact that Boise State is a run-based offense. But the receiving game is also going to be something that Boise State has started to push more. So if Boise State tries to make that more of a focus this game, this player is going to be key. And regardless, Boise State still needs that passing game as part of their offense, even if they are a run-focused team. And this player is someone who can definitely contribute. It's going to be Latrell Caples, wide receiver for Boise State. He has been the leading receiver, really starting to separate himself a little bit from the pack. 22 receptions for 211 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's 46 yards more than any other receiver, 4 more receptions than any other receiver. Stephon Cobb's the guy that everybody thought was going to be number 1, actually at 18 receptions behind Latrell Caples. He had 4 receptions for 56 yards in 2021. So a player who had 4 receptions in 2021 for 56 yards, 22 receptions this year for 211 yards, really pushing himself, I think, to being that top threat for Boise State. I think he needs to take the next step. I think he needs to become that guy. He needs to play like he's the number 1 target for Boise State. Boise State needs to find ways to get the ball into his hands. Stephon Cobb, still a very capable player for Boise State, who is also a top receiver on this team. I mean, he's in the top 2 there for receiving on this team. But Latrell Caples is really starting to step away a little bit. I think Boise State should find some creative ways to get the ball into his hands. I think he's a playmaker that when you start looking at the run game, slot receiver, guy who can get yards after catch him, and Cobbs can do that too. But I think Latrell Caples has a little bit, he's shown something this year. I think Boise State needs to dig into that and start using him a little bit more, targeting him a little bit more, finding ways to get the ball in his hands, even if you're not making it a pass-focused offense, which Boise State's not saying they're going to. But if they're going to be even using the short passing game, finding ways to get the ball into Latrell Caples' hands. All right. 3 key players here for Colorado State. We'll make this quick because we're already at 11 minutes, and I like to make these videos a little bit faster for the previews. Quarterback Clay Millen, he was the highest graded recruit ever to come to Nevada, flipped to Colorado State when Mike Norvell came over, true freshman for them, just coming back from an injury. He played last week against Hawaii, got the win against Hawaii, but he got injury versus Sacramento State. It had been a couple weeks since he played, and Colorado State actually won 2 games in his absence. So he's really trying to solidify, continue to make sure that he's saying he's the guy, he's the one that Colorado State needs to run their offense through. And he is definitely probably the future of this offense as a highly recruited talent. 844 yards passing, 73.3% completion rate. So really pretty high completion percentage. 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So not necessarily getting it into the end zone, but he is throwing more touchdowns than interceptions. But that is a part of his game that he definitely needs to work on, and maybe something Boise State can capitalize those interception numbers. Now, Boise State, remember, a defense, the secondary, who while ranked actually really high, I believe they're number 1 for pass defense in the country. That is a big part of having played a lot of guys who can't throw and also having played a lot of offenses that run heavily. That secondary is definitely vulnerable. Quarterbacks who are able to throw have been able to expose that defense. So Clay Millen, a capable freshman, he could find something against Boise State, especially if they are looking ahead to BYU. Wide receiver Torrey Horton, 6'2" wide receiver for Colorado State, transferred from Nevada. Didn't actually play against Boise State last year, but he had a pretty good year for Nevada, over 600 yards receiving. He's 538 yards receiving so far this year, 5 touchdowns for Colorado State. Definitely being their number 1 target. I think after him, there's like a guy with 100-something yards on the roster, but Torrey Horton is the target for Colorado State this year. And then third guy here is defensive back Jack Howell, 67 tackles, number 1 on the team. 3 out of the 6 interceptions by Colorado State, again, number 1 on the team there. And he also has a forced fumble. So this is a ball hawk. This is a guy who can go out and make the tackles in the open field, and he's going to be able to pry that ball free and to make a play. And Boise State, Taylor Green, a quarterback who hasn't shown that he has the most accurate, consistent arm, is definitely someone who could maybe fall prey to this guy if he's not watching. So Colorado State, those are their top 3 players for them. All right, now keys to the game. So what does Boise State need to do what do they need to do to build in this game, and what do they need to do to win this game? Well, number 1 is going to be find RB3. Every run-heavy offense, they have that number 1 back, but it's never really just 1 back. It's really 2 to 3 backs that a run-heavy offense uses. Now, Boise State obviously has their number 1 and number 2. George Holani and Ashton Jeanty are your number 1 and number 2. You have 2 NFL level, NFL Holani if he can stay healthy. And, what Jeanty has been able to do as a true freshman is absolutely insane. It should be criminal how insanely good Ashton Jeanty is. This kid is absolutely phenomenal. The future of Boise State is incredibly bright behind Ashton Jeanty. But Ashton Jeanty and George Holani, 2 incredible running backs for Boise State. Those guys are your number 1 and number 2. But you usually also have, you look at teams like Army, or you look at teams like Georgia Southern when they were running a very run-heavy offense. When you look at teams that are run teams, I'm not necessarily just saying option teams, but teams that are run-heavy teams, they'll have, 1 or 2 backs there that are vying for 1,000 yards, but you also have a third back who's usually at like 300 or 400, something like that. Because you've got to have that 1-2 punch, but occasionally you've got to bring in a third guy because those 2 guys are running the whole time. They get a little bit tired. A third guy to come into rotation, and maybe sometimes you want to have your first guy take a break, but you still want to have that 2-back look, and then the third back comes out. So Boise State needs to, in this game, find that back. Now, that's going to be helpful, the fact that Holani and Jeanty are probably going to be out, and if they're not out, they're not going to probably be 100%. Jeanty could be, depending on exactly what the injury was and the recovery time, and it's been a week. If it was some kind of head injury, and maybe they were just being extra cautious against Air Force, he could be 100%, but Holani's definitely not going to be 100% in this one. Definitely a chance for Boise State to rely on that third back. They should be able to beat this team with one of the backups who played well. All the guys played pretty well. against Air Force. So, but Boise State needs to find that guy who is that number 3. Now, Noah has kind of risen there. I mean, he's been the running back that came in and played really well against Air Force, and he'd seen some experience. He saw some experience against Fresno State as well, and he runs well. I mean, he's a smaller guy, but he runs with a lot of energy. He runs with a lot of talent. Tyler Crow, he's a running back who has been consistent for Boise State, former walk-on who earned a scholarship, and even the freshman Dudley. Kind of play around with it. See what those guys have to offer. Make this a little bit of a competition. Find that number 3 guy. It's probably going to be Noah. But honestly, Tyler Crow has a lot to give. He's the bigger back of these 3 options out here. Definitely a guy who can use in short yardage, who runs extremely, extremely hard, and also receiving threat, apparently, which I don't think we knew about Tyler Crow, but he was targeted a couple times, made a great catch on an underthrown ball against Air Force. So find that number 3 running back, and especially in a game that is going to maybe be pushing those guys into the starting roles anyway, this is a definite chance to find that number 3 back going forward. And really, I mean, Helani could be gone after this year. That guy could become your number 2. We'll see what happens with the recruiting. I mean, Boise State got Genty. They could get another Genty, which would just be insane, coming in, one of the freshmen, or they could bring someone in the transfer portal, which I think is very likely. I think Boise State will very likely bring someone in, but that's a postseason type of discussion. But I think Boise State will definitely probably bring someone in to back up. But you're really kind of making that discussion of who's your RB3 this year, and maybe talking about who's going to be that RB2 or still RB3 next year as well. So Boise State definitely number 1 key here is going to find that RB3. Second, make Vidlac your third and long quarterback. It's just not working with Taylor Green on third and long. Taylor Green's your starting quarterback. I'm not saying make Vidlac the starting quarterback. So get off of that train right now. Put those fists down. We're okay. Taylor Green is the starting quarterback for Boise State. Boise State's offense needs him because it is a run-heavy offense. That is what Boise State wants to run. It's what Andy Avalos wants to run. That's what this offense seems to be built for, is a run-heavy offense. So it's just not working in the long passing game department when Boise State has to get into obvious passing situations. But as far as the offense overall, the offense is built for Taylor Green, and his incredible athleticism demands to be on the field. So Taylor Green is starting quarterback. We're not having that discussion. What we're talking about here is when you get into obvious passing situations. Taylor Green, when his legs are taken away a little bit, when it becomes you've gonna have to throw this ball, that's when he really he steps down a notch from his total potential and what he brings to the game. Keep it third and short, he's your guy all day. But Boise State right now is really kind of playing almost Canadian football, where they have like 2 downs, and if they can get close to on that second down, they can make the first down or get close to it, then they got a good chance on the third down. But really, they're basically playing 2 downs of football, where the first and second down are beneficial and positive, and then the third down is basically a throwaway before the punt. And that was especially clear against Air Force, where Boise State was 5 of 13 on third downs. Most of those long attempts, I believe they only converted 1 long third down attempt. So it's a good chance for Vidlac. Boise State has as good a chance of achieving a first down with Vidlac out there as they do with Green. Because when the defense knows that Green's going to pass, when he has to become more of a pocket quarterback, especially if they force him to stay inside the pocket, he doesn't think the same way. He doesn't approach the pass the same way. When he knows that he's locked in, his legs are not the option, the running game is not there to support him, and he has to throw that ball away, he makes some questionable decisions. He throws in places he shouldn't, and he doesn't throw the same way he does when he's on the run, when he's improvising, when he has the fact that he could run if he wanted to. Third and long situations, you've got to get Vidlac out there, and it gives him a chance to get involved in the game. Now, I'm not a fan of rotational quarterbacks, especially when you're rotating someone in to throw. But Vidlac has shown the ability to do that. He's shown the ability. He has the arm strength. I mean, he was throwing out 75-yard bombs the other day in practice. So he has the ability to throw. I think we need to find a way to get his talent onto the field. Third and long situation where you already know you're not going to make it. I mean, it's less than a 50-50 shot, I believe, when you have Taylor Green out there on third and long. So you might, even though it's not the normal best plan to bring out a quarterback who's maybe a little bit cold, who hasn't been throwing the whole game, to bring him out and put him out on third and long in an obvious passing situation where you know he's going to throw. But if you're having to pick between 2 quarterbacks for an obvious passing situation where you know they have to throw, Vidlac's your guy. You've got an extended field there. He can definitely throw it with more touch and get the ball down the field further. So even though you are putting you in an obvious passing situation, you're extending where that ball can go. And then he can also throw the underneath and the short stuff just fine as well, at least at the same level, or especially when forced into a pocket level type pocket passing situation. I think he's the better guy for the third and long. So I think Boise State just needs to make Vidlac their third and long QB, and I think that would resolve a lot of issues for those third and long situations. Now the last one here, so find RB3, make Vidlac your third and long QB. The third one here is reestablish your run identity. Boise State going away from it a little bit at times in different games. San Diego State first half, they didn't use it. They were kind of trying to be more of a pass-heavy team. Second half, they said we're just going to run it, and it was great. Fresno State, a little bit of inconsistency back and forth, especially the first half. Second half, again, they committed to it. They committed to it a little bit earlier in the first half, and they were really, really good throughout that game because they were mostly focusing on the run against Air Force, and I think impacted by the fact that Holani was out and that Genty wasn't 100%. Boise State passing a lot more. Boise State passed a lot more in that game than they did in any other performance so far with Taylor Green in the run-focused offense. Boise State, and it didn't work very well. This offensive line isn't built for that kind of offense. When they aren't being helped by the fact that the defense is having to consider 3 running back potentials in the backfield, or a second running back there in Taylor Green, when his legs aren't a factor, when the defensive line is not being ground down play after play after play after play after play by the offensive line, the offensive line looks like it has for the last 4 years. It looks subpar. Now, when they are being ground out all the time, and Boise State is having to bringing in a quarterback who can run, and the defense is having to spread out its options, and you're putting in some opportunities for some single press there for the offensive line going up, or using some double team opportunities by the offensive line, then that's when they start to look really, really good. But Boise State needs to have that run-focused identity for the offensive line. Green's not built for the passing game, especially from the pocket. And honestly, neither of these wide receivers. Boise State just hasn't had the consistency across the board for wide receivers to get open all season, even before Green came in, when it was Hank Bachmeier. Boise State's wide receivers have struggled to get open all year when they're forced into a routine passing game. Now, when you're pulling out the pass, you've run it 6 or 7 times, and now you pull out the pass, and now they're open. Now they're finding ways to get open. But when you are telling them you've got to go out 1, 2, 3, 3 out of 7, or more than that, probably 4 out of 7 plays in a drive and make a play on the ball, the opportunities just aren't there. The short passing game, in coordination with the running game, where you're bringing your tight ends in and pretending to block and then putting them out in the pass, or you're bringing your wide receivers again, pretending to block and then sending them out in the pass, that's when you're finding opportunities in the passing game. But when you're just passing purely, it's just not working. I know Holani and Genty potentially being out is going to hurt, but a run-heavy offense honestly doesn't need to have your top guys, your top runners in there to be effective. The fact that you are running so much wears the defense down. You have Taylor Green. If you use his legs a little bit more, it will help out. It will help open up some opportunities and allow these newer running backs to take off and have some bigger games. I think Boise State needs to focus on that. It's the fact also that Colorado State is better against the pass than they are against the run. 50th overall in the country, 219.8 yards given up per game in the pass. But against the run, they're 75th in the country. They're giving up over 157 yards per game on the ground. It just works better with what Boise State has to offer. It's worked so far this season, and I think that it will allow, again, to kind of help out with key number 1, finding that RB3, and allowing Boise State to continue to find success with an offensive line that has struggled in a pass-based offense. So Boise State, find your run identity again. So find RB3 as number 1, make Vidlac your third and long quarterback, and reestablish that run identity. Now, quick summary here, because again, we're at the end, and I did a pretty good job at the beginning previewing this overall. So let's just summarize some points here. Number 1, this is a trap game. Boise State is dealing with some injuries at some key positions, potentially in the running game. And they're facing a very motivated, especially coming off 2-1 wins so far, 2-1 out of the last 3 games, and a Colorado State team who is also well coached. May not be showing, but they are well coached. Mike Norvell is a good coach. If any coach can find a way to beat Boise State, it's Mike Norvell. So that's kind of a downside that Boise State's taking on here. Now, the upside is Boise State is rolling. They are rolling. They have momentum. The fan base is behind them. They are at home. It is incredibly hard to win in the blue at all times, but especially right now where the fan base is reaching a fever pitch. I haven't seen a Boise State fan base as excited about being a Boise State Bronco in a long time. This fan base is so committed and behind this team. It feels like it's back in the classic early 2000s, mid 2000 days of Boise State football. So they're rolling. It's at home. This offense functions in a way that it's hard to overlook. So even if you are overlooking towards BYU, it's very simple, and the run-focused offense just makes it something that you can go out and just do over and over and over again without changing many things, and it's not going to be hard to go out there and execute. So it's not. So even though Boise State could be overlooking this game a little bit, it shouldn't impact the offense that much. This Boise State defense has been very, very good. Now, again, there could be some opportunities in the air against Colorado State, and that might be an issue. But as far as shutting down the run game, they should be able to do that. They're going up against a true freshman who's coming off of an injury, so he's kind of a little bit rusty. He was able to warm up against Hawaii, but he's still a little bit rusty. He's thrown some interceptions this year. He's a true freshman. Boise State should be able to rattle him, get in his head a little bit. Again, there might be some opportunities, but this is a good Boise State defense. I do expect Boise State to win this one. Again, I'm calling it a trap game. I'm talking about the ways that Boise State's got to be careful. But in the end, I do think this is going to be a win. I think it'll be a little closer than Vegas thinks, but I still think it should be a good, sizable win by Boise State. I'm going to say score prediction here, Boise State 35, Colorado State 17. Now, having said that, if George Holani and Ashton Jeanty are 100% and play the whole game, it's going to be a bloodbath. Boise State's going to win by at least that 27-point margin, maybe more. I'm kind of going off of the assumption here that either both those players are out or they're on a limited snap count. We see more of Noah, more of Crow, maybe some of Dudley, and Boise State is maybe trying to preserve Taylor Green and not use his his legs in the running game quite as much. So my score prediction here, Boise State 35 versus 17 is based on those qualifications. But I do expect Boise State to win this game. Can't overlook them. Colorado State could be a dangerous team as a trap game, but Boise State should be able to win this one. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for liking and subscribing. I've loved seeing the increases in subscribers recently, up to 622 subscribers, which has been great. Thanks so much for the support. Keep liking, subscribing. It's what keeps making me be able to keep working and building and doing these videos. So thanks so much for watching. And as always, go!